Hello friends, my name is Eric and I'm the developer of Virtuous Heaven, which is a game about punching kings, hugging friends and the end of the world. I think that's why I ended up at this point with the tagline. It might get workshopped over the next few weeks because, well, boy has this game changed since I last did a video about it, which was back in January, which was quite a long time ago. So yeah, it is now September. I did work on the game. I have no idea what I talked about really in the previous video, and I also didn't really bother to check it. So who knows what I said, who knows what happened. What I did realize, I apparently put it in the last presentation, and honestly I don't even know if I uploaded the January video. I'm going to check. Anyway, what I put in the last presentation, last month's presentation, was apparently that my plan was to put the game together, basically to build it all out and see what happens. And well, that's what I did. Kind of. But also it's complicated, because, well, I'll talk about it. Let's just go a little bit about what happened in the current state of the game, because considering the amount of time, considering how long the Steam page has been up, and like a lot of other things, there's a bunch of stuff that I'll probably have, I'm probably not completely getting to in this video or in any video, because then I would be talking for 3 hours instead of the usual 45 to 90 minutes in these videos, which is already too long. But anyway, so what's the current state of the game, and then I'll talk a little bit about the journey to it, maybe if I find a way to do that briefly. So the current state of the game is that you can sort of play through the whole thing. There's a start point, there's a progression in place, there are boss fights in place, there's a narrative structure in place that kind of says something, and people say things about these things, and you can play through it, start the game, play through the tutorial, play through, explore the whole map, free all your friends, and, punch a bunch of weirdly looking and right now slightly buggy boss fights, and then reach an end. So that's cool, right? That's really cool. In a lot of ways, it's really cool because I've been working on this game for, almost 7 years now. And it's going to be 7 years, definitely going to be 7 years once this game is done, because it won't be coming out this year. That's definitely the case. I have a date in mind when I would like to release it, but it's a secret, because I need to hit certain things for myself to be confident enough to announce it. But I'm 99% sure that it'll come out next year. We'll see when. Anyway, so there's a basic structure. So there's a game now here that you can play, and there are things that you can do, and there are systems in play and all that kind of stuff. And I know, and that's kind of really the big step forward from this version of this game, as in comparison to the previous versions, and who knows, maybe I'm pretty sure at some points I already said I know what I want this game to be, and it turned out to be not the thing that I wanted it to be. But and yeah, I know what I want it to be. I really, really do know what I want it to be, and the it was one of the weirdest moments I had in terms of making something, where I went out for a walk. It was I think late May or early June, while I was basically in the middle of making all of the boss fights, and then basically reaching the end of the quote unquote regular part of the game, and then having to think about, okay, what do I want the final bit of the game to be? And I was struggling with that, and this is like is one of the big problems for me with like previous versions of this game, because sooner or later I came to a point where what I had nowhere else to go, kind of. Well, like, I kind of, okay, yeah, I have these things in place. I have like a thing that moves around and does things, and then you do something else, and that does something else, and whatever. But there was always a point where like I had the question of like, okay, and now what? And I had no answer for it. And I was kind of at that point again. And I went for a walk. I was feeling horrible about a lot of things. And like about like 20 minutes into that walk, I realized, oh, this is what I'm making. We'll see how it ends up, or like at the end, how like that thing that I realize is going to be expressed at the end, because that very much depends on like how the next few months go and how much time I have. Yeah, it was an interesting realization, and like suddenly things made sense, and suddenly I, instead of like having to kind of force my way forward, like most of what exists of this game right now is basically me just repeatedly telling myself, don't think too much about it being coherent or it making sense, just build the things, put stuff in place, and the idea will come. Just trust that the idea will come, because otherwise you will not go anywhere. And it did happen. And it was kind of great. And it was also very weird, because I suddenly realized, wait a second, I can finish this game. This thing will actually be done. And that's cool. And like made me really, like, on one hand, really glad, but also gave me a lot of confidence in like the project as a whole. Again, like I was keeping very quiet about it for like most of the, like, I don't know, basically since like the Steam Next Fest in like February 2023. Like I did some stuff, and I like talked a bunch about things, and like did some updates, but like at some point I started to just not talk too much about it, because I felt until I really had these things figured out, I didn't really want to like talk about ideas when it wasn't really clear whether or not I would actually do them. And that's also a reason why the Steam page never really got updated in that time, and why suddenly, since like I think 10 days ago, or like roughly 2 weeks ago, the Steam page now looks a bit different. And there's a new trailer, there's new music, and the game in general looks a bit different again for reasons. And that's like, and the reason why it's happening now is because now I have the confidence to actually do these things. And honestly, this is like something that I probably will have to like work through like once everything is done. But like in general, I think I did most of the announcement stuff like way too early. Like the game wasn't like nearly as far along as I thought it was, and I like, even though like the general advice for like Steam page stuff is like, oh, make it very early. Like, and maybe it's okay, but like, I kind of like treated it like, oh, it has to be like, once I do that, it has to be done, and like that I couldn't afford to show like creative insecurity in the like in making this thing. And what was definitely way too early was doing the Steam Next Fest, because first of all, the demo wasn't very good. And also because what I had in terms of like ideas for the game and knowing what the game needs and what kind of levels and structures and enemies and stuff like that it needs wasn't there. It was very like a big mess in a lot of ways. But anyway, this is like where there was like a lot of silence, and I had to like work myself through it. But now there's like much more confidence because I know what I want it to be. I know what it's now, and I know, or at least I have an idea of what I would like it to look like once it's done. And it's like very clear to me because the basic building blocks are there. Despite my occasional lapses in like discipline, what you see here in terms of like map size is what you're most likely going to get for like the regular game. What comes after this area like really depends on a lot of things. It might be fairly big, it might not be, or like it might change, who knows. But the general like size and like basic like progression and like way through and all that kind of stuff is kind of like in place, and I'm like putting my foot down and saying like I'm not going to touch this because I keep getting different ideas, or like, oh, what if I try this instead, or like what would this idea like fit better for like what I want to express. And like, no, like this is the game that I'm making, and I have to like at some point you have to just like again put your foot down and just say like, this is it, this is what it's going to be, and it's going to be the best version of what it's going to be, and this is what I'm trying, and I'm not going to go back and try a different game instead, because I turned 40 this year. I would like to finish this game before I turn 60. So at some point I have to move on with my life, right? But anyway, so yeah, that's the whole thing. You can play through the game, and the last point here is like, it being complete doesn't mean that it's finished or that it's good right now. There's certain parts of the game that are not where I think they should be, or like ideally should be one for like a finished commercial product, but I'm fairly confident that I can get them there or like very close. I hope the microphone doesn't pick up whatever like construction work is going on next to me. Who knows? But I hear it and I'm slightly irritated by it. But yeah, that's kind of like where I am right now. Also, this is sort of like just like as an aside. In case anyone watches this who has played Witcher 7 in some version or another, especially like during the Steam Nexus, and played the game with a keyboard, I am very sorry. Like, first of all, because playing the game with a keyboard is a pain. I have no idea if I'll ever find a good way to play it comfortably with a keyboard. I want to like work out a way where I at least think, okay, now it's okay. I don't know if it's possible because there's like a lot of buttons you have to press. But I did like a sort of private playtest with like I asked people over on my co-host account if they were interested in playing it, and like I got like 20 people or so. And during the feedbacks round, I like also started building a tutorial, and while I was building the tutorial, I noticed that there's like a move that you can do in Witcher 7 where you do a dash and then you press the attack button, and then you kind of like chain that dash, which is like an evasive maneuver, into a punch, which is an attack. And that's kind of like a fairly important thing to do in the game. And when I built the tutorial, I noticed, and I don't know if I may have changed that in the demo build for the Steam Nexus and never in the full build, but whatever the case, in the build that I was working on, the punch, the press the attack button to do a dash punch was never programmed for the keyboard controls. So people with keyboards could never do that move. And that might also explain why I was sometimes when I watched people play, I was fairly frustrated when they never did these moves because they couldn't. Or it might be one of the cases, but anyway, it's like I'm deeply apologetic about the Nexus demo in general because wow, it was not good. And considering how much I kind of created my personal well-being for a few months for it, it wasn't it was not that worth it, to be honest. But it's a learning experience in a lot of ways, and we'll have to deal with whatever that is. It's all a bit unfortunate in a lot of ways, but what can you do? Anyway, that's kind of something some things I just realize in that thing. And the funny thing here is really that dash punch. Again, I've been saying the game's in some form or another has been existing for almost 7 years now. I think I programmed the dash punch around in, I don't know, somewhere in the first half of 2018. So 6 years. In these 6 years, I never got that mistake. And it's a bit of a weird one. Also a nice sign for oh, you see why? No wonder you have ADHD. You did that and never realized it because you'd never played your own game with a keyboard for long enough. Anyway, so that's the case. What else has changed? Well, I gave more colors to the game. That was kind of a big thing. I think I again, it's one of these things where I don't know if I mentioned that. I think I kind of hinted towards it, but was very hesitant and towards the end of 2023 to publicly show this stuff because I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to dedicate the amount of work to extending the color palette of the game. But once I did some experimentation and realized, okay, I can extend the color palette without having to touch the characters, and extend and use different do palette swaps there because the main character alone consists of so many frames of animation, and I already did a palette swap from earlier versions of the character design to what you see here and what's now in the game, and having to do that again with even more frames of animation, I didn't really feel like spending another 3 weeks or so of just doing that because that's kind of the amount of work that would be behind that. But once I realized that actually the character sprites with basically still using the Super Game Boy palette work well with the extended background colors, then I thought, okay, might as well. I can just do that and give a bit more variety in the thing, because one thing I noticed as well with the previous versions of Virtua 7 is that it's as much as I enjoy working with the Super Game Boy palette in terms of you just have these 4 colors and you have to work with these, building a larger game with and trying to push stuff environmental variation got really difficult for me at some point, and I had I didn't really like the way the game looked at the end, that version of it. And so I was looking around of finding ways to extend the color palette without really going overboard, because in the past the reasons why I went with the Super Game Boy palette is because I used to use much more colors in my pixel art, and it was kind of I was way too over detailed, and it led to things looking worse and me taking way too much time to get anything done. So this move towards using only 4 colors really helped me in focusing down on just these 4 colors and getting good at that part. So I was a bit hesitant to then extend the color palette again, because I'm like slightly afraid of doing the same mistake again as I did in the past. But basically, even though I extended the color palette, I'm still kind of keeping to the limitation of like use at maximum 4 colors per sprite. Like for background art, it's usually 2, maybe 3. And this way I can still keep things simple. And in general, I still, like when I draw background art, I still start with the Super Game Boy palette and then go in and work with different colors, because the other problem for me is I am red-green colorblind, and this is like another layer of difficulty for me to understand. Okay, how does this look? Is this good? And I kind of drift towards like a specific color spectrum because I'm more comfortable with them. Like basically, I tend to like stay more in the red to bluish spectrum because like yellow and green are difficult. Like because green looks like either like yellow to me or like gray, or like not like green because I cannot see green really. That's the thing. But yeah, like what I'm using basically is like Sprite has like a Game Boy Color palette. I don't really know the specifics because I don't know the original hardware all that well. But basically, it's like a set of colors. And what I did was I went in there and desaturated everything by like, I don't know, like 10 to 20% or something like that, because the original Game Boy Color palette was like fairly oversaturated because no backlit screen and all that kind of stuff, and like it was like a bit too harsh. And in general, I kind of like desaturated palettes overall, and it works fairly well. There are like some things where it's like you have a lot of colors that are very close and a lot of like, and not a lot of colors of like different hues. So it's like a bit wobbly in terms of like certain things that you can do with them. But you know, it's, again, it helps me add more visual variety and depth to the game without making things too complicated for me. And this is like always having to balance all of these different things, because at the end of the day, I work on everything. Like everything in this game goes through my hands and is being made by me, except for the promotional art. And that means I have to make decisions on like, okay, how much time can I spend with this? How much is it, like, does it add to like what I want to do? Is like is the time investment and all these kind of things, is it worth it? Is the extra energy that I need to put into this stuff, is it worth it? Or when is basically the point, like do I reach the point where it's not worth it anymore, and like I have to like make decisions on that part? And I think I found a good compromise here. And again, like at this point, most of the visual and like environmental art is done. Like what's the big thing that's currently still missing is character portraits. If you watch the trailer, you might notice that there are only like 2 or 3 character portraits right now that you can see in the trailer. It's because those are the only ones that are done. And I'm trying right now basically to take like 1 day per week to make 1 portrait, or at least work on one. Just to also on one hand to get more used to it, because drawing character portraits is a bit more involved, because you have more space for more detail, and even though it's just like a 48 by 48 canvas, which still isn't all that large and high resolution by any means, but still it brings doing pixel art much closer to just doing a drawing, and I'm not very confident in my ability to draw things, and that's kind of like where I kind of get to my like to the limits of my comfort zone, and which makes doing things harder and more difficult, and like makes me question more of my decisions, so everything takes longer. But yeah, I keep working on them because I need them. I cannot. The problem is you cannot release a game where like 2/3 of the character portraits just have like the text placeholder in them. I don't think that works all that well. So I kind of have to do that, and I cannot pay anyone else to do these for me. So I have to figure out a way to do them myself. And it's fun because, like, again, this is the nice thing. The more you do them, the more comfortable you get, the more like better you get at them, and the more quickly you get something that looks okay, instead of like spending like a day fiddling around until you have something that's not quite there and annoys you a lot when you look at it and makes you want to go back. But also it's a Saturday and it's already 6 p.m. and you shouldn't be working for that long anyway on a Saturday. But anyway, that's what I've been doing. And the other part is like, and this is a large thing. This is a gift from last April. You may see like an enemy who has like the hitbox displayed, this one there, with the hammer displayed on top of it, because again, it's a test spell. But this was like, I don't even know why I did, like why I recorded this playthrough, but I did that. And I was kind of glad, because just randomly I recorded this sequence. And something I realized this as I was playing through this sequence. This is what this game is supposed to feel like, and supposed to be. And this is like basically as I was doing this, and like really like I've been trying to re-record this GIF a few times already, and it's so hard to do because the time, it's not really that, oh god, your damage is too low or whatever, but like getting the timing on the movement like right to chain these attacks together and like keep moving forward is very difficult, because it's fairly likely that you collide with a wall somewhere, or like miss a button press at the right moment, and like don't really have the height, or like don't have the distance to cover like the whole screen and stuff like that. So but yeah, as I was playing this, I kind of like realized, oh wait a second, this is what I want this game to feel like. This is what I want, ideally what I want most of the moment to moment quote unquote map exploration to feel like. This very aggressive, reckless, pushing forward, like leaving a wave of destruction behind you, kind of style of play, and way less of this slow and ponderous and almost like way too careful way of exploration that I think again was a bit of a problem in the demo build for the Steam Next Fest, way like back in early 2023, which again, a lot of this was fueled by me not being quite there in terms of like understanding what this game needs. And like all of this in general has to do with me basically building the entire game in reverse in a lot of ways, in terms of like it started with, okay, I have this character and this character can move in such a way, instead of like, okay, he is like, this is like what you're doing, what like, or what I want this to feel like, what do I need to do to facilitate that? Instead I had, okay, this is what you can do, what could this facilitate? And I had no idea what this could facilitate, because, and this is like something I keep running into, is like, because I occasionally do like research, look into other games, look into other like exploration focused platformers, and like also like action games and stuff like that. There aren't a lot of games out there that I can point towards and say, okay, this is kind of similar. The one game that is kind of close to it but like plays very differently is Neutulov 2 by Joachim Sandberg, which came out I think in 2008 or something, which still is amazing, I'm not very good at it. I don't think I ever finished it, but like for me, the first level of that game is peak video games in a lot of ways. And in terms of just sheer spectacle and pushing the player forwards, it's the closest I can think of. And that's kind of, again, interesting in regards, and then like also compared to like what that game is, which is like a very much like, it might as well have been like an arcade game in like the early 90s or something. And Virtua 7 isn't, because it's like still very much a like a Metroidvania in terms of like, oh, there's a map that you explore that it's kind of like interconnected, and there are like things you have to do to like open new paths and like explore these paths, and there are upgrades that you can find and stuff like that. So upgrades in quotes, because it's not the same, but and that's again, and the problem for me was, okay, I didn't really know what like, again, what kind of like structure would facilitate what I had, like this moveset, because I had the moveset and had no idea what game would facilitate this stuff. So and again, this is why building out this entire map was fairly helpful, because then I had a space to explore and like different types of like layouts, like for rooms and platforms and stuff like that, to move through. And I noticed certain patterns where I realized, oh, this is kind of like what I think what like most of these spaces should feel like. Whereas there are like some areas in the game where I feel like, yeah, this is way too far away and doesn't really work with what I have. And I could only see these things after I've built them and played through them way too many times. So that I now have a much better understanding of, okay, this is what this game needs, and basically how I'm like phrasing all of this is like, I want this game to be about like the moment to moment stuff being about recklessness, about this notion of again, aggressively pushing forwards, taking large risks, and not being too concerned about failure. And that's something that I think like really changed in terms of like how like punishing the game is, in terms of like what happens when you die. In a lot of ways, you still get reset to your checkpoint, and there's still that whole thing, but basically the way it's set up now is that when you die at the place of your death, you get like, there's something that gives you an extra boost of power to go beyond that, instead of like what was previously the case, you lose that resource that gives you power and you have to get back. So basically it's sort of like a reverse Bloodstain, if you would compare it to Dark Souls. It's not exactly that, because like the whole system works differently in Virtua 7, but like if you were to compare it, it was like would be like similar to that in spirit, at least, in that, oh, if you can manage to get back to the place you die, you get a boost of power, instead of like you lose something and you have to get back to the place where you perished in order to get it back, and if you fail on your way there, you lose it entirely. So it's kind of flipped it around. There's still stuff that I want to do here to make all of this work better, because it's still not there. It has something to do as well with a lot of the stuff in the game being built around a different kind of approach, or like a not very focused approach. So there's still work to be done to make sure that like this actually works, and works the way I want it to be. And there's a good chance that it might never really work the way I want it to be, because it's kind of trying to do something slightly different, whereas the game's presentation doesn't really right now like encourage you. Like there's basically I want there to be more stuff that really, really pushes this notion of like, keep going, keep moving, keep throwing yourself into enemies. It's going to be fine. You might get punched, you might fail. It's going to be fine. And you're going to look beautiful while doing this. This is like the other part. The other thing that I sort of realized this was like while I was like writing something else, like I may link it because I did a post, I did a like longer explanation on co-host. I might also like put it on my website as well about how I would like to facilitate specific playstyles in this game, because I noticed like how a lot of people that playtested the game were basically repeating the same move over and over again. I was like then thinking about, okay, how do I facilitate different playstyles without just punishing people for repeating the same thing over and over again. And this was just like a random phrase I put down, but basically the idea of like, I want this game much more to be about players asking themselves, how do I want this sequence to look like when I get through it, and not as much about what are the correct inputs that I have to perform in order to get through the sequence. Because this is like, I think the largest difference between what I think Virtuous Heaven's like core should facilitate and is built around in a lot of ways from the beginning. Like the very, very first version of Virtuous Heaven didn't even have a health bar. You were kind of like, it was impossible to die. There was like a different consequence for like getting hit over and over again, but it wasn't meant to be about, oh, and now you die and you have to do it all over again. And now you can fail, but it's for different reasons. But still, this notion of like, it should be much more about players figuring out the way for them to express themselves in the game, and much less about them thinking about, oh, what is it that the designer wanted me to do here? And that's like what a lot of platformer level design in the end is. You build a challenge and then then teach the player how the character moves, and then put more challenges in there. But in general, most of these challenges have like a set of solutions occasionally. Like really depends on the type of game and the range of moves that you have available. But usually, sooner or later, even like in exploration games, it comes down to each challenge is a set of like inputs that you have to perform at like the correct time, at the correct location, in order to move past them. Obviously, each of these has like variations, and the difficulty in the end depends on the how tight the timing and the location, or like the relation between these are. And I want to basically push this entire spectrum much more towards the question of like, how do I want to look? What do I want to do in this sequence? How do I want to dodge these things? How do I want to damage these enemies? How do I want to move myself and place myself in the environment? And which of the 8 moves or whatever, like don't even know how many you could use for different things, do I employ in order to get there? Obviously, there's like this range shrinks and expands depending on situations, but like especially in these sequences between boss fights, these larger spatial like traversal sections, I want to be much more like push much more this notion of like, how do you want to look like? What do you want to think after you've gone through this sequence? And what do you want to attempt as you approach it? And much less about, oh god, okay, now I have to do this, and then I have to press this, and then I have to go to the right, and this is that enemy, I have to wait for this signal in order to attack, and all that kind of stuff. So, and again, this afforded a lot of like adjustments. This isn't something, I didn't build the entire map with that in mind. I built the entire map just like, okay, yeah, kind of like kind of like this. I knew from like the previous versions like what this game definitely doesn't need, which is, for example, rooms with spikes in them. And stuff like that, or like very complicated platforming sequences. That's not the game for it. But then again, adjusting the constructions of the levels and the areas in such a way that you can basically channel specific kinds of approaches in a way, or like specific like paths that players take through a level while they're attacking enemies on their way. And this is like kind of like the next thing in terms of like, okay, if you want to like facilitate this type of playstyle, you need like the area design, the specific level design, the enemy design, the way enemies behave and attack and like react towards you approaching them, as well as the boss fights, all need to facilitate and push players towards this specific style of play. And the last thing I really want is for players to think that what they actually need to do is stand in front of an enemy and wait for an opening to attack them, and be like overly cautious about like approaching them or like being aggressive. What I really want, and again, like you could play through the sequence what you see here, like very meticulously. You could get up there, wait for the enemy to attack, and then dodge that attack, and then attack them, like punch them 3 times, and then they explode, and it's all good and fun, and you get through it. But there's so much more that you could do in that sequence, right? So much more that you can express in that sequence, and like be like, again, you could be so much more. And I want to build the game in such a way that players are being encouraged to play more like what you see here instead of like what I just described. Problem here obviously is that when someone plays the game, I'm not sitting right behind them, and I cannot tell them, you have to do it like this, let me show you, whatever. So I have to find ways to get this out of people as best as I can, and that's going to be difficult. I think I already know from playtesting that like I think the version got better over time because I realized that stuff fairly early on. But there's still much more that I can do, and this also goes down to like teaching players how the movement system works and like giving them space to explore like the limits of it, and like how precise they have to be and all that kind of stuff. And that's like another layer of it all. And again, there also has to be like, I have to be mindful of like it building basically around like a certain baseline, but that making sure that baseline is still fairly on the lower end of it all, and not like, basically what I also don't want to do is like forcing players, like basically telling them, okay, you have to play it like this or it's going to be awful. Because most people won't play the game like this. I play the game like this because I build it, and I know how everything works. I know where every enemy is, and this is why I can play it like this. If I wouldn't have made this game and I would play it for the first time, I probably wouldn't play it like this. I'm fairly certain I would be able to do it. So I have to find a way here to slowly get players towards that, and that's going to be difficult. But again, that's kind of like part of like this next phase of making this game for me. So let's talk a little bit about that part. I have concrete plans for like what I want to do for the next month. But considering it's been a while since I did one of these videos, I kind of like want to do a bigger overview what I need to do. So basically fairly high up on the list, and like I'm leaning towards right now, because previously I always kind of worked in blocks. So there was like a large, okay, you build all the levels block, and then there was a large, okay, now you make new enemies block, and all that kind of stuff. And I think I might switch over to a have specific days to work on specific things block, because just because I like going through these long phases of doing the same thing every day for like a month or two is very draining. And I think like splitting these up like over several days, and like have a day where you work on reworking boss fights, and then have a next day where you like adjust parts of the map in some way, or like rework parts of like the level design in like in a specific way, might help. Or like taking some time to update the UI, which is desperately needed. But yeah, basically this is the list. I want to rework all the major boss fights. What I find really funny is that the January devlog had also like, okay, I built this basic structure for a boss fight, and I can just adjust the values, and I kind of still working off of that thing, but the boss fights that I made with this aren't very good, and this is why I want to redo them, because as I was working on the first version of the final boss, I did a lot of I actually did some research on boss fights, and how other games have been approaching them, and then asking myself, okay, what do I want these to look like and feel like? And I landed on a specific form, and I made the final boss that way, and it was much more interesting. And I learned, like, I basically also like used a few new methods to like build attacks and like make sure that the boss moves in a predictable pattern and all that kind of stuff. And which obviously then meant I have to like the usual thing. First you build the whole thing, and then you build it again, but good, in a way. The boss fights that I've made might still show up, it depends. But I want to do some that are much more planned from the beginning, what I want them to do. Because very often when I made boss fights, I was very driven by, oh, this is what the boss is going to look like. This is what it's going to do. And like basically in the terms of like design stuff, I very often build things, and it's a lot in my games in general from like function follows form. So I built the form of the thing, like the aesthetic, or like how it looks, like how it moves. And then I think about like, okay, what function does it have? Like for an attack, for example, what function does the attack have? What movement do I want to motivate? What approach do I want to motivate? Like, and all that kind of stuff. And it was always driven by the form of the thing. And what I'm building right now is basically something where like I first build the attacks out, I first build the patterns out, and then I worry about like what they might look like. I have fairly good ideas of like what these bosses will look like and who they're going to be. But again, if like it has to fit what it's supposed to communicate in a lot of ways, and that's the more important aspect of it all. But yeah, that's part of it. The rework has also to do with like other like systemic and like kind of like sort of narrative-ish elements as well, for those to make more sense and like to be possible to do in the code itself. And yeah, and then it comes around to like how to build the map and how that looks like. That again, there are just certain things that I noticed that I could do now, and that would probably be better than what I have now, that I want to put in place and just see if it works better or not or whatever. Again, the UI needs to be updated because, like, first of all, it is out of date in comparison to like what the game is. And also it's if I spend that much time to make the movement of the character feel nice, I think I need to spend like probably not as much time, but like a lot of more time on like making sure that menu navigation and all that kind of stuff is also flawless, smooth, and feels fun to do. Going into menus in my games rarely is fun. I want this to be cool. Menus can be cool. Like, it can be fun to choose something and put it somewhere. It doesn't have to be awful or like barely functional. Right now my stuff is functional, but it can be better. I think I can do it better. But for that I have to spend time on it. And I have to build something that facilitates it. Which probably isn't the case right now. So that needs doing. I need more interactions with the friends, like the whole hugging your friends part of it, and all that like has now like it's of much higher significance and it's much cooler. But what I want to have is like basically bespoke interactions between each of your friends and the main character, like kind of like express whatever their relationship is, or like the personality and all that kind of stuff. Working on the dialogues and like again also thinking about, okay, how much narrative do I want to put in here? Right now I'm leaning kind of like towards like more probably than you might think, because I'm always driven by, I want to tell a story, but very rarely like fully commit to it, and like I want to commit to it more, just to see how it goes and like how good I feel. There won't be like hour-long cutscenes or whatever, but there might be a bit more text, though I'm going to try to keep basically text box length to around a tweet length, just for myself, and to keep text at a low amount, also because I do a lot of spelling mistakes, and at some point I probably need someone else to look over it. And that might cost money, and the less I write, the less expensive it will be. And the last part is to figure out a way to find more people who are interested in this game, because I'm pretty sure that there are more people than I can currently reach. This is going to be hard. I don't know if I can do this, because interacting with people is difficult for me, but I want this game to have a real chance of finding an audience, like first of all for commercial reasons, but also because I'm fairly certain I'm making something that really, there is nothing really quite like it out there. Might be a good thing, might be a bad thing. Who the hell knows? But this is just something like that's like very, very, very like deep-seated belief in me. Is that like this is something that is like very, in a lot of ways, different. But also I think that this is like something that I think a lot of people might be interested in or might like. But how the hell do I find these people? And that's the difficult thing. Anyway, this is, like almost an hour. But anyway, I'm going to stop here. I am going to, like, again, like we'll see how it goes. Who knows? Maybe over the winter my energy goes down again. But like, the aim is to do these again once per month. And now to keep on track until the game's done, because I'm mostly through this valley of confusion that I was in. And now it's really time to push things along and talk more about things and put stuff out there and show what this is and to a degree also justify my decisions, I guess. But anyway, this has been way too long. You can find me at these places. I will also like do an email newsletter again. You can subscribe to it. I think, I'm fairly certain it still exists. But that one will also come. And I have plans on like what to do in terms of like promoting the game or like talking more about like specific details and stuff like that. But like these things, I want to talk about these things once I'm doing them and once they exist and once they're planned and like kind of scheduled along, and not talk too much about plans that have absolutely no foundation in reality. A lot of what I've been talking about here has not a lot of foundation in reality, but like there are some, like this thing exists. So like even my plans for the future are still kind of like based on these things. When I talk about like, if I were to talk about like very specific, oh, I want to do this for marketing, but I haven't really done that in any shape or form, or like haven't even prepared something or like tested it. That's like me just talking about things, and I don't think that's very interesting. But anyway, I hope you have a nice end of summer, I guess. It's still unreasonably warm, but anyway, it's September. Summer's over, friends. Time for rain, darkness, and depression. Huh. Well, there's also Christmas, but I guess. Anyway, have a nice one. See you next month. And let's see where this all goes. Bye.